And of course, being an economist, I have to put up not only with the Auburn jokes, but with the economist jokes. Lay them all end to end, they wouldn't reach a conclusion. Economists have predicted 7 of the last 3 recessions. Economist is a person who did not have the personality to be an accountant. I think the last 2.5 years will go into the economic history of this country as one of the most unique on record. When you think about what this country, this economy, we as a people have been through, starting with the recession, 9/11, war in Afghanistan, the scandals, stock market, counting, war in Iraq, threat of nuclear from North Korea. All of this in the context, of course, of a political environment, the midterm elections we went through, and now a presidential election. Do you have any idea the impact that that had on analysts and forecasters during that period who were getting all of this information, trying to ferret out what was happening and, more importantly, what was going to happen? And essentially, we got a great deal of our information from 2 sources, the media and the political environment. We do not get information unvarnished. You won't get the same take on an incident out of the New York Times that you will the Wall Street Journal. Fox News is not going to be the same as CBS. Then you have the ever objective Rush Limbaugh on talk radio. In the political environment, where the 2 opposing sides use every method in the book to try to make each other look bad, and a great deal of attention is not paid to truth. So in that environment, you know, how do we anticipate it? It became very much apparent, especially in this period, that unless we have some understanding of the entities that shape our economic future, we have no chance of understanding where the economy may go. We're talking about Washington, the presidency, the Congress, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. I'm amazed at the perception we have of the presidency. When the stock market hit one of its lows, about 7,000, they thought it would be a good idea for President Bush to give a speech one night. That would take care of it. Next morning, everybody was very much disappointed that it had no effect whatsoever. They even did a poll. How would you rate President Bush's handling of the stock market decline? The president handles the stock market? In the debates, Al Sharpton says, vote for me and I'll give you universal health care. How many people in the audience do you think actually believe that if they got him elected, he'd do it? Or could get it done? Or that Dr. Dean says, vote for me and I'll do away with all the tax cuts. How many people in the audience actually believe that that would happen? Unless we have a better understanding, no chance. Let's start on the presidency to begin with. A perfect example of what I'm talking about is the first term of the Clinton administration. During the 8 years of the Clinton administration, we had unprecedented prosperity any way you wanted to look at it. And according to the Clinton White House, all of that happened because of President Clinton's economic policy. Question: what was Clinton's economic policy? Now, I mean, that is an important question, because if that policy got us all that wealth, we need to find out what it was and write it down. The policy was actually reflected in the first big piece of legislation of the first term of the Clinton administration, the Deficit Reduction Act of 1993. So I want to use that as a model to answer the question, what was the policy? But remember where we're headed here: the power of the presidency. The Deficit Reduction Act of 1993 called for deficit reductions paid for by tax increases and spending cuts. The president's economic policy called for $474 billion of deficit reduction paid for by $300 billion of tax increase, $174 of spending cuts. Now, that was the president's policy, but the House of Representatives got a hold of the president's policy, and when they got through, this dropped to 343, paid for by 246 of tax increase, 97 of spending cuts. But then the Senate got mad at the House version because they were too heavy on the taxes and not enough on the cuts. So when the Senate got through, this went all the way back to 576, paid for by 279 of tax increase, 297 of spending cuts. But that's not what passed. What we ended up with was 495, paid for by 244 of tax increase, 182 of spending cuts, and we were going to save $69 billion somewhere. Now, what's significant about this, what President Clinton found out, what Bush has found out, is that proposals and contracts and campaign promises have no meaning whatsoever until and unless they are passed into law. And what they both found out is that getting legislation through the Congress of the United States is like going into a lawsuit. You go in a pig, you come out sausage. Pig, sausage. A political analyst said that when this piece of legislation was over, President Clinton ended up being an innocent bystander. What was Clinton's economic policy? Who remembers a BTU tax that was going to raise $72 billion, a tax cut for the middle income people, a $16 billion economic stimulus package, a tax increase, and nationalization of the health care system of this country? How many of those were passed into law? One, the tax increase. Every other part of President Clinton's economic policy was defeated by a Congress controlled by the Democrats, his own party. And yet it was the president's economic policy. It's like being in the military. If you're in command and something happens on your watch, it belongs to you. If it's good, you get promoted. If it's bad, you get on back to your office, get all your crap, and